Welcome to the what is this, fellas? Fifth episode, fifth producer roundtable over Zoom. Myself, Zach Davis, alongside Robert Gounsolin, Debanny Cerda, and Joseph Duffey. No Justin Gooseman tonight. Still getting over the hours from the flight to Atlanta and back. Um, but anyway, fellas, we saw the college football playoff rankings drop. Texas in
hmm
third. Let's start with Robert. What are your overall thoughts with how it looks?
Honestly, for the Longhorns, it they obviously wanted to be in the Sugar Bowl and have that bye, but I don't think for the Longhorns this get any better than what they could have hoped for. I mean,
hmm
playing Clemson in the first round as a favorite, it looks good for them. And then if they win, they go play Arizona back in Atlanta. And I quite frankly, that's the best matchup that they probably could have gotten for the bye, other than maybe Boise State. But but best case scenario for the Longhorns right here after that loss to Georgia yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about best case scenario. The Texas Longhorns are quite fortunate this morning after getting the news that they would have that bracket right there. Not to say that, Cam Scatterbo and Arizona State Sun Devils are just some weak team. They're not trash by any means. But considering what you've just gone against in the Georgia Bulldogs, who are responsible for both losses on your resume, it looks a little bit more favorable to go against a team like Clemson, who some were arguing shouldn't have even um, had a chance to even be in the CP rankings at one point, and they found a way to rally and eventually get into the ACC championship after a tough loss against South Carolina, the rivals. And after that game-winning field goal, you couldn't help but think, man, this is this the team that's going to play Texas if they can't hang on to the SEC championship? And lo and behold, Katie Klubnik is going to make a homecoming to Austin, the former Austin Westlake Chaparral, coming back home to face off against a man he also played against in high school football, and Quinn Ewers at South Lake Carroll in DFW. So we got a little bit of history in our hands, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds, really.
Speaking of college football, well, not college football, but mostly high school football, I think this is the best draw Texas could have had. I mean, you get a Cade Klubnik homecoming game in Austin. You have, I believe it's four Westlake students, four former of his teammates. I believe it's four of them who are on the Texas roster. You get Klubnik and Ewers. You get that matchup. But aside from that, you also do get Andrew Makuba playing his former teammate. And I believe once he transferred, a bunch of the Clemson players were saying they were saying negative things about Makuba, how one, he wasn't not necessarily that he wasn't a good player, but he wasn't a good leader and he wasn't a good teammate. So I think that's also another storyline to look at. So I think this is the best draw Texas could have had. I mean, you have, and listen, this is the most color pleasing bracket I have ever seen. Like, you have, I mean, I don't know if the committee meant to do it or not. I'm assuming they didn't, but you have three orange teams on one side and two red, and then Oregon obviously being blue. And then on the other side, you have four technically if you're considering SMU and they're blue, four blue, and then if you consider SMU in red, you have three blue on that side too. So it's a very pleasing color bracket to look at.
Yeah, no, it's a good
I think this goes without saying, Boise State. Go for it, Zach.
All right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think what I
I
was
was
gonna
just gonna
say.
say, I think
Oh, go for it, Robert. All right, I
you,
got it.
you got it. You got it.
All right, I
You
got it,
got it.
Robert. Um, troubles of Zoom. I think it's very interesting looking at this bracket. Two of my takeaways are one, if this was a four-person bracket or a four-team bracket, Texas would have played Georgia again,
Mm-hmm.
2 versus 3 in the rankings. And I don't think, but like, if we were in a world where it was a four-person bracket, do you think Texas would have even been stressing out? And before we answer all that, I think if Texas won that game, they would have had an easier path to the final. But I think by losing that game, Texas has been given an easier chance to go to the semifinal. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Does
does
that make
make
sense at
sense.
all?
So I saw on Twitter and obviously this is gonna have to be a topic of conversation later, which we can easily get into it after what I'm about to say, or we can wait on it. But it's no secret that Burr Auburn missed the field goals, but someone on Twitter posted a photo of him and said, Burr Auburn saw the vision.
I saw that.
Because he,
That was pretty funny.
I cackled a little bit because it was he knew he had to do bad so he could give Texas an easier path.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny too because we say he did bad. Obviously, we're a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Texas fans are mad at the two field goals that he missed, but
Mm-hmm.
he made four of them. In all fairness,
Mm-hmm.
he made four field goals, including a game tying one to
Yep.
send the game to OT. So I do want to not be so tough on the guy. Of course, if he did make his field goals, Texas would be the victors and would have that auto bid and bye. But he did make four field goals, and you could argue that because of those misses, Texas is in better position to possibly want to right all wrongs and get to a national championship, which would also be in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Might just have to call that stadium Texas East at this point because they might have to hop over there a few more
Mm-hmm.
times. And I don't know if y'all even recognize it from the broadcast view, but there weren't that many Texas fans there. There's a
Yep.
good amount, respectable, but it was a sea of red for the most
Um,
part, and understandably so.
it was abysmal, but like just to go back a bit,
As
Joe,
someone
don't
in
you
the
think a
crowd,
41-yard field goal? Don't you think a 41-yard field goal, Joe, should be automatic at the college football level? I mean, I know,
Indoors, yes, absolutely.
and we're talking about going to the bye, winning the SEC in your first year. I don't think we should excuse that. And yes, he made four kicks, but they were not difficult kicks. And you miss a 41 yarder, and that decided the game. And I get the 51. I was watching it with some people, and some people were like, we should have punted instead of kicking a 51-yard field goal with Burt because he only has one made field goal from 50 this year. But my question is, at what point is it supposed to be automatic? And what point are you supposed to excuse the kicker?
well, I feel like I'm so used to having Texas kickers drain them from 50 to 55
Mm-hmm.
yards out. There's been too many times this season where I feel like Bert Auburn has missed from around the 40-yard range, and he's kind of set the standard now where every time he comes out and lines up from that range, I'm not very confident that he's going to drill it. We used to have Justin Tucker, Cameron Dicker. In the middle of that, there was Anthony Farah, who was really good, and Nick Rose was also very good. All consistent kickers who could drain it from about 50 yards out. But I feel like this year we're kind of used to a standard now with Bert Auburn being a little shaky from about 45 plus yards, and we're not really sure. This is not something we're really used to. So, yeah, I think for Texas, the standard is 50 plus yards, but clearly that's not what's happening this year. And I also wanted to add, being a fan at the game, Joe, you're right. There was not a lot of Texas fans there. From the Texas student section, the Texas uh alumni section, just the total Texas fan base being right there. There's also a blend of Georgia fans from the left and the right. And every time that something good would happen from Georgia, you would hear some cheering around you, but you were never really sure if, or for a split second, is this Texas doing well? Are these Georgia cheers? Are these Texas cheers? There's just not a huge presence of Longhorn fans at Mercedes-Benz yesterday.
Not a lot of people at not to sidetrack, but terrible showing today at the Moody Center. I mean,
Oh my God, ridiculous.
I mean,
Monahan was there, right?
Yeah, no. So what was interesting about the Yukon game tonight? It was as the national anthem is finishing out. Yukon fans break out in their own little chant. So like halfway through, Yukon fans were loud, and you could hear their chants more than you could hear anything Texas was chanting, whether it was defense or whatever it was, whether it was clapping or cheering. These Yukon fans did not come to play. They showed up, and there was a lot of empty seats that should have been burnt orange seats.
maybe it was the travel, maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
finals week. There's a lot of excuses, but we're talking about the biggest non-conference game since
Mm-hmm.
Gonzaga 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I mean, is what it is. But let's going back to football. I can't miss those kicks. I mean, it's clearly going to be an advantage when you're in Atlanta. That's a couple hours from Athens. If we were playing in Dallas, we did play in Dallas. Texas played in Dallas last year against Oklahoma State, and that was a sea of burnt orange, and that's pretty close to Oklahoma State. So I'm not discrediting the fan base. I think there's a huge advantage in playing in your home state, let alone a
Mhm.
couple hours from your school. Um, but yeah, it's just it is a big factor for field goals, for big moments, for the noise, the noise points of the game. You just don't have that to you, and that's also that with the unfamiliarity of playing in the SEC championship. I think both played a huge factor in Texas not being able to win that game.
I will
Yeah, I
also
think
say, yeah, go ahead, Robert.
I was just gonna say real quick. I think Mercedes-Benz, if Texas gets by Clemson, I think Mercedes-Benz for the quarterfinal will serve more as a neutral site game than it was for
Mhm.
Georgia because people will be coming from South Carolina and Texas. That's all I gotta say.
And going back to Auburn a little bit, I think that he's really just been hidden, you know? I don't think he's ever been this solid kicker. The thing with this team the past 2 seasons that he's been on the roster, he hasn't had that many high leverage kicks. I mean, can
Mhm.
you think of many high leverage kicks he's had besides maybe the game tying Red River kick 2 years ago, or any field goal kicks he's had for a potential lead? This team either blows people out or they just find a way to maybe not complete a play on fourth and goal. He hasn't had many opportunities to really showcase how clutch he could be. And so I thought that last night against Georgia was kind of a way for him to get a little bit exposed. Again, he missed 2 field goals. He made 4, but like Zach was saying, those are manageable field goals in an indoor stadium. I thought they should have been made for sure. But I don't think it's just abnormal from Bert Auburn, like Robert was kind of hinting at, to say that he should have just been automatic, and he's been automatic the past 2 years. Because I really have been a little bit of a critic from behind the scenes, a little bit of him, because I've never really thought that he was that crazy of a kicker. But he didn't have to be, you know. He didn't have that many high leverage opportunities, and he finally got those opportunities last night, and he just didn't deliver. And maybe it works out for Texas in the long run. Who knows?
You know,
Speaking, do you want to go? Do you want me to
yeah,
go?
I'm gonna go real quick, Deb. It's
Okay.
it's unfortunate. I just wanted to quickly add. It's unfortunate um that my first memory of a bad bird memory was at the Bama game when they came here, and it was a 17, 18-yard field goal to take the lead going into halftime, and
The
he
Will
missed.
Anderson, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, he missed.
yeah.
So
I
it
think
was
it was an extra point, right?
I think it was a
Yeah,
field goal. I think it was a chip shot field goal. It was from no, it was from the right hash. It was like one of those weird angled shots.
it was the end of the half though. I remember that.
Yeah, it was one of those right angled shots where you really have to like almost like 45 degrees to it, and he fired it straight, and it was never even close. And I was so that's where I haven't had faith in Burt for the beginning. And at the same time, I feel like we had the entire state of Texas, let alone the entire country, to get any kicker Texas wants. And
Mhm.
talking about a Power Five program, and you don't have a top five kicker, like I don't know. I don't know. Dad, what do you think?
Well, we talked a little bit about how do you think the pressure obviously the pressure got to Bert, but more importantly, this leads to my next question. Do you guys think Bert felt a little bit, I guess, uncomfortable because he didn't have his friend Bevo on the sideline? All
Why
jokes,
why
all
are we
jokes
not
aside,
traveling with Bevo?
yes, all jokes aside, how do we feel about Bevo not traveling?
I thought it was hilarious because there was a moment in the beginning of the game where they were showing Uga on the screen, and this little tiny section of Texas faithful in the crowd were chanting, "We want Bevo," and it was actually getting pretty loud. But just to show how many people in red were there, it got drowned like 5 seconds later just by chanting UGA. That's how
Yeah.
much of an advantage that Georgia has in that stadium. And so I just find it funny that we're doing this in conference games now, just having the. It's not intentional, of course, because anybody can win the SEC and be a host really at that stadium. But it's just the fact that they don't have it in a stadium maybe that's not accustomed to a state maybe that is how am I trying to explain this? Like the fact that Norman can host the softball championship, or the fact that the Mountain West flat out has the number one team in standings as a host, like Boise State. So I just kind of find that kind of crazy they're still doing this. Of course,
Mhm.
people weren't really complaining about it when Alabama was in there a lot of times, but I just find it a little bit annoying because they have the overwhelming advantage there in that
I think
stadium.
it's I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. It's a complete disadvantage. But at the same time, you think about it, what do? You go to Dallas, well then Texas has the advantage. Like
It,
New Orleans.
it reminds me of when LSU won their national championship in the Superdome in 2019. Like
Yeah.
no one was like take yourselves back to August of that year. No one was expecting LSU to be that good and go win a national championship, but they did. And it just so happened the Natty was going to be in the Superdome in New Orleans that year. And I guess that's just what happens is you don't know how these teams are going to actually end up through 4 to 5 months later. And if it happens to be the team that's closest to the stadium, so be it. But I do understand the frustration. Now going back to Bevo, I think that is also frustrating for Texas fans when they can't travel with one of their biggest icon. I mean, I now handling an 1,800-pound bull is a lot harder than walking a dog on a leash. But
A
when the
mutt.
quarterfinal games arrive, and if and only if Texas is in that quarterfinal game, if Georgia is allowed to go to the Sugar Bowl and bring UGA, if SMU can go bring their pony like they
Mhm.
did in the ACC championship game yesterday, if Tennessee can go bring Smokey, and I was looking at it today, I think there's a fourth live mascot in this bracket. If they can go bring Smokey, I think they're all different bowls, but I think if they can do that, Texas should be able to bring their live mascot too to a
I'm,
neutral site.
I'm not gonna lie. When I was walking the field last night, there's not as much space as I thought there was in the sidelines. And I was starting to think, like, where would they even put him? I mean, if you look on a little bit towards the end zones where he would usually be, I mean, that wall is not spaced out as far as I thought it was going to be. It seems like the seats are really almost right on top of you, and that's not a usual theme that you see in newly constructed stadiums like Mercedes-Benz Stadium, because that's more of a theme you see in the older stadiums like Oklahoma State and Boone Pickens Stadium. They're like right on top of you, they say, and that's what makes it sound so loud to the players. But if they did bring Bevo, I don't know how he'd even fit in that great stadium. It was a beautiful stadium, by the way, but I
Yeah,
don't know how he'd
great
fit in there.
Great point, Joe, because I remember the Big 12 championship last year, they brought Bevo to AT&T Stadium and where they had his away or his portable pen, it was practically in the tunnel of
Oh,
of
okay.
one of the far end zones. Like you could see him from any point in the stadium, but he was practically super close to the it's just right on the entrance of the tunnel. He was right there. So he's like hidden basically. But
I don't
yes.
even remember him there. Wow.
I just like where would you put him? I think what's wrong with putting him on the Texas side? Like kind of in the corner,
Behind the sideline? Oh,
behind on the sideline. Yeah, because there's plenty of space over there. Kind
Well,
of not like directly behind the sideline, like not in the middle of the field, but kind of like by the 10 or the 20. Like he could
Mhm.
be on TV too for like half the game if anything was on that side of the field. I mean, there's never an excuse. If they have that much of an advantage too, you're not even gonna let Texas bring Bevo. It's kind of a dagger to the heart.
I agree.
I think it
How do they put him in the Superdome?
He had a
they have
pen.
But
he had
like,
a
it
pen
doesn't seem like
behind the
they have much space
sideline.
there.
I
No.
think I think the people that run the Mercedes Benz are Georgia fans, and that's what I'm gonna live with.
Oh, probably.
I mean, Washington brought their husky too. Not that
Okay,
bringing
but Dogs
dog.
was cute.
Yeah, I know.
Dogs.
Not that bringing.
Well, see, I think that's what Texas gets for being so unique and having the most out of the box mascot. Because everyone else has dogs. It's so easy to travel with. So I guess that's what Texas gets.
I
I
think
think there will be a huge comparison here. Whether SMU, if they win, whether they're going to bring their pony versus when if Texas wins, they bring a Longhorn. It's going to be interesting.
um All right, pivoting from Bevo to the fan bases, I feel like this is a good theme to stay on for this episode. So we'll wrap it up with this. Is college basketball, is Texas's football success hindering the fan base and exposure of Texas basketball? That's what I
Yeah.
was pondering that tonight during the game, and a thought came in my head. If Texas football wasn't doing so well, would there be a bigger focus on this Texas UConn game?
Yes, because everyone would be so done with football that it would be, I'm so over this. Let's just move on to the next sport. And that's usually how, I mean, the past 2 years it's been when Texas went 5-7 my freshman year in 21, and then in 22, where yes, they started to get a little good, but it was when Chris Beard was here. And I'm not condoning that Chris Beard was a good coach or anything. Take it with a grain of salt, if you will. But Chris Beard capitalized a lot on, well, our football team isn't doing so good, but let me get everyone else excited for this men's basketball season upcoming. He held so many events. He got a lot of the students involved, and he's part of the reason as to why the corral is what it is now. And I think if Chris Beard would not have, if he wouldn't have been hired, and if he wouldn't have taken that moment, we would not have a college basketball atmosphere at Moody like we do have. So I do think because football is doing so well, it's very much, well, all my focus is there. And I also don't think Coach Rodney Terry does a very good job at advertising to people that, hey, we are playing UConn, like, please come out to the game. It's not on the same level as Coach Chris Beard is. Because if you look at it, there wasn't a lot of talk of, oh yeah, Texas is playing UConn this weekend. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. Meanwhile, if it was Chris Beard and it was his team, you would have seen it all over socials.
Well, that's just, I guess, the embarrassment of riches of being at the University of Texas. I mean, most of the sports here are very competitive, and people are going to just try to milk all they can out of football season, and that will never really be challenged. Football, if the team is good, will always get the most coverage out of any of the other sports. But I want to ask you all this. Do you think that it's also UConn's fault as well? If this was the UConn of last year, that was, a number one team, a top three team that didn't face a three-game losing streak in Maui, do you think that there could have been possible better attendance? Because obviously a lot of the fans were probably just more invested in the SEC championship, traveling um, to Georgia, maybe just watching from home. Do you think UConn's play probably has something to do with this, at
I
least
think
in your perspective?
that's a great
Mhm.
question, Joe. And I do think 100% that is a big factor. I mean, when you look at a game as a fan that doesn't really follow college basketball, but as a fan of Texas athletics, you look at the ESPN, whatever, you do all the research you can on the team, you see what your team is going to do. And when you do that, you also make the decision in the back of your head, where should I be there or not? And when you look at the box score, whatever, the preview, number 25 UConn, right? That's like, okay, if you are a Texas fan, you don't give a flying F about the number 25 team in the country. That's just
Mhm.
a Texas fan, not as a Texas basketball fan, but as a Texas fan. Do you get what I'm saying, guys? So if UConn was ranked if they won in Maui, they'd be the number one team in the country. So if if Texas is playing the number one team in the country as a Texas fan, that raises your eyebrows. That makes you want to be there. I think it would have been an unreal atmosphere if things went elsewhere in Maui. And I kind of knew that going into it, that this would be better if UConn had a better outing in
Mhm.
Maui. But then again, still a great basketball team. And as a fan of college basketball, I was happy to be there. I was just very upset that Texas didn't travel to the home game.
See, I understand the point you're trying to make, Joe. Like I understand where you're coming from, but my thing is it's like, even if you're not necessarily a college basketball fan or anything, UConn's kind of one of those blue bloods. So I feel so I yes, It doesn't, yes, they're still ranked. It might not be the highest ranking as possible, but I think having the name UConn and Dan Hurley brings a big brand in, regardless of whether you're a college basketball fan or not, because they're one of the blue bloods in college basketball. And not only that, but everyone watches March Madness. And once Dan Hurley and his team hoisted that trophy, it's, oh, they're back to back national champions. And not even that, but on Twitter, once they won that championship, it was on my feed on Texas, like on the Texas feed, that Texas is hosting UConn. So I just think it was poorly advertised. And I think that's why the attendance was fairly low. I think obviously the focus was more so on the SEC championship, which I mean rightfully so. I understand. But I do think there could have been better marketing strategies from Texas Athletics to make this game an unreal atmosphere game.
Robert, how about you close this off?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask this real quick. So I know that we talked about, Texas football playing in the SEC championship this weekend being a distraction from fans showing up to the basketball game this afternoon. But is the lower attendance this afternoon, could that also be a result of us losing the game yesterday and fans not having that morale boost to go to the game, not having that motivation to go to the game? Do you think if we were to have beaten Georgia yesterday, Texas fans would have been on some emotional high, would have been like, let's keep this train going, let's keep rolling, let's go to the UConn game today. But whereas instead, oh, they lost, and you're like, I don't really feel like going to the game yesterday. I'm just kind of bummed out about yesterday. What do you think? There's a sort of a trend like that going on?
Yeah, I mean, just to round it off, yeah, absolutely there is, and we can go in more depth. That's a great point, Robert. Let's go more. Football squad, you guys go more in depth about that on Friday, Tuesday, and we'll bring it back on Sunday for next week. Zach Davis alongside Robert, Deb, and Joe for episode 5 of the Producer Roundtable, and we are signing off. Have a wonderful rest of your week.